Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Megan Howard. I'm the Director of Branding at Treadstone Funding. And this is the third in a series of educational webinars that we're doing for our friends of Treadstone and the community. And this one is near and dear to my heart. It's about nature and teaching our children how to love nature and in return to be good stewards of the planet. So I just recently had a baby, and it's become really important to me to make sure that my daughter loves and respects nature and learns through it. So I invited someone who I have a great respect for, Sally Triant. She is the founder of GrowWise Learning. She's extremely knowledgeable. I'm going to let her introduce herself so I don't screw it up. If you have comments and you want questions, feel free, if you're on Zoom, to just type it right in from Zoom, or you can comment on Facebook and we will try and get all the questions answered. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Sally. And yeah, there you go.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Megan. Thank you, Matt, for the tech support. I'm thrilled to be here. Definitely love always having the opportunity to share my passion for connecting people to the natural world. So I'm going to start my presentation.
Before you start, Sally, I just want to say really quickly, too, Sally and I are 40-year-olds on doing tech, and she's a nature teacher, so we may have some cutouts and some tech difficulties. To stick with us. Her internet's not great in Rockford because she lives in the woods in a teepee.
Yeah, no.
A yurt.
A yurt.
I wish. I'd love to build one out here. No, I'm actually joining you from my classroom, though, with GrowWise Learning, my business that I've developed to teach place-based educational experiences to students of all ages. I have a classroom in my home, and I love to run workshops here. I also work as a consultant helping educators learn how to add place-based education to their curriculum. So people often ask me, what is place-based education? And I like to compare it to sort of the shop local movement. And it's just connecting sort of required curriculum and education to what's happening right here in our local watershed and ecosystem. So that's place-based learning. And so my name is Sally Triant. My business is GrowWise, and I added, you can find me on Instagram, and I finally did get Facebook, and I'm working on a website. But I'm excited to be here today. When we first had the shelter in place warning, or that we're in, it made me think of one of my favorite concepts in place-based learning, which is the sense of place. And that is something that I hope that we're all going to get a better understanding of as we spend time in our homes and in our backyards with a lot more frequency right now. So the concept of place is innate sort of for all animals, and it essentially just means that we all need to have a home. And whether it's solitary or communal, all living things have one. Bees have hives, turtles have shells, foxes have dens, birds weave nests that are unique to their species. So we all have a place that we call home. And my hope today is to help you sort of look at your home a little differently. When you look at it through your sense of place, I like to call it our sixth sense, because it plays sort of a key role in who we are. We have a deep bond with the places where we learn and grow. And so today I want you to start to look, like I said, at your backyard, your neighborhoods, your local parks through a little bit different lens. When you start to wonder, how can we connect with place? The first thing I like to do with kids is just have them in a nature journal. It's a really simple practice, and a lot of people sometimes just don't know where to start. And I just encourage you to just start at the beginning. You don't need to complicate it. What feels right for you? And one of the first things we did, I brought some props to get our boys excited about going outside. They have adventure packs. And their adventure packs have them, they have a compass and a magnifying glass and cool stuff, but they also have a little set of their own colored pencils. And, whatever nature book they're interested in at the time goes in their adventure pack. And then also they have, I love these moleskin journals. These are their little nature journals. What we do when we're outside is just pay attention to the things that we see. And when you do this, when you start to practice this science of observation, you're actually doing something called phenology. I think I'm losing you for a minute. Hang on. Am I there?
Yep.
Okay, I'm back. So you're practicing something called phenology. And the thing I love about that is then you can call yourself a phenologist, and I think you sound really smart. But what you're doing is you're just paying attention to nature around you. And one example that I gave in this slide is from one of my son's journals. Let's see if I can find it right here. Well, it's the picture of the strawberry at the bottom. And what we did is we tied a string around where the flower began, and then over time watched that strawberry, that flower turn into a berry. Now I can't find his picture, but it's fun to watch kids just be blown away by something as simple as a flower turning into a they can eat. So gardening and creating nature journals are some of the places that I always encourage people to start. We have such a beautiful fluctuation of seasons in Michigan, and just by tying your observations to the changes in seasons or things like the phases of the moon, those are the easy jumping in points to starting to pay attention to nature. One of my favorite books, and I'm going to do some books at the end, I'll give you a list of all of them, but this Keeping a Nature Journal by Claire Walker Leslie is one of my favorite ones. Again, there's no right or wrong way to keep a nature journal, and I encourage you just to find what works for you or your family. So then when you start to connect with place, that's when the fun really starts, because that's when you start to cultivate that sense of wonder. And your sense of wonder is that feeling of surprise. The definition says it's a feeling of surprise mingled with admiration, caused by something beautiful, unexpected, unfamiliar, or inexplicable. But wonder is also the verb to desire or to be curious to know something. And when you're cultivating it, you're fostering that growth. And so it's easy to find that sense of wonder in nature, especially with kids. I noticed they're at eye level, and their eye level is lower and closer to the ground, and they just happen to notice so many more amazing things. So definitely grab a kid if you don't have one already and get outside with them when you're wandering and wandering. So that's your job, to connect kids. That's your only job. Just get them outside and help them wonder. I encourage, we call them taking wonder walks, or we create a wonder wall where we put the questions of things that we wonder about and want to learn more. And that's when you start to find out, you're fascinated about hawks, or you're really curious about a butterfly's life cycle. The picture that I put in the bottom right is one of my favorite examples. This is by Gavin Preeter Penny. He did a great TED Talk, and he encourages everyone to keep their head in the clouds. He created the Cloud Appreciation Society, and this is the Cloud Collector's Handbook. And this is fun because all you have to do is go outside and look at clouds, and they're all different kinds of clouds are described in here, but there's points for the different ones that you see, and you can keep track of when you saw them and get points through your handbook. I love this. I would definitely encourage you to look at his TED Talk too. It's a fun one. So when you're outside in your own backyard, noticing all these things that you're curious about, that is when you will start to, again, like I said, find the things that you're really interested in, but learn that your own backyard is just a magnificent, wild, and wonderful place. You don't have to go see tigers or flamingos. Like, we have incredible creatures buzzing and growing and flying and, living right here with us. I think especially at this time right now, I was drawn to the quote to share here by Wendell Berry, that the earth is what we all have in common. I mean, we're experiencing this unprecedented time. And in that, we have the opportunity to sit where we are and look closely at the world around us and sort of think of our place in it. in that, what I would encourage people to do is to learn to identify the things that you find in your backyard. And in doing so, you can create your own field guide. So when you're looking at field guides, there's so many examples of wonderful field guides. And if it's something that you're interested in, a favorite jumping off point for me in this biome is the Northwoods Wildlife, A Watcher's Guide to Habitat by Janine Benyus. She's the founder of biomimicry, which that's a whole other webinar. But if it's something you're interested in, I would encourage you to check it out. So when you are looking in your own yard, sometimes I like to have a process or a project sometimes to help me direct my learning. I found this through, I believe it was Little Acorn Learning, and it's the 52 Species Project. So start learning a species a week of things you see in your own backyard. And again, it doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, look at a dandelion. Look at the life cycle of a dandelion. They're fascinating. And the seeds, we all love to make a wish and blow on them. Anywhere you look in your yard, you're going to find something magnificent that you can tie your learning to. So I encourage you, again, have your students, your children, take their curiosity outside and find that one thing that they really want to focus that energy and start building their learning on that. When you start looking at your backyard, then another fun way to get kids excited about being outside is map making. And this is one of my favorite tools, and I could go on forever. I'm going to keep it succinct, but map making is a great way to learn math skills. It's a great way to learn about the history of an area where you live. It can lead to story writing, and there's so many layers to it. You know, just simply like burying a treasure and then having someone else go find it with your map is a fun tool. And map making also lends itself to another thing kids love to do, which is fort building. So map making can be used. One of the book's examples that I gave you, it's a tool that you could use to also learn more about the species. This book is As the Crow Flies. I love this book because you look at what would an eagle's map look like and what would a rabbit's map look like. And so you start to think through the lens of whatever species you're studying, what would their map look like? And so then the maps that I'm sharing with you today are my son's of our property, of our home. And one of the reasons I showed the two together is because when you're map making, I think it's really important to remember that kids see the world, you know, through their own lens. And there's, again, no right or wrong way. And it's important to encourage them to just draw what they see or what they know. The 5-year-old's version I thought was fascinating because it's much more pictorial, and there's an emphasis sort of on the home, but then the lines lead all the directions going to the fire pit. There's also bees flying around. The 7-year-old is a little bit older and started already to see the world from that aerial perspective, from above, which is what older children typically do. And you could do this, I think, for days, and there's so many opportunities to learn with it. There's there's a quote I love. It says, "We must never lose sight of the goal of using maps as clothespins, a tool for hitching children's lives to their place." And that's by David Sobel, who wrote the book Map Making with Children. And this is one that I used a lot in my research on place-based education. And this is a pretty dense, not necessarily like it, but if this is a subject you're really into, you might find this tool of value. So the other thing I like about map making is there's ways to make it age appropriate from young to old. So there's all kinds of options there. So when you're outside with your maps and looking at your yard using your field guide that you're creating, now another fun opportunity is to become what's called a citizen scientist. So this is a fairly recent movement where crowdsourcing data has begun to be used to contribute to, research all over the world. And what I think is cool about this, especially for older kids, is that they're putting on the hat of, becoming a real scientist. So they're collecting data and contributing and part of a global movement just by paying attention to what they see. I listed some of my favorites for especially this time of year. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has Project Nest Watch, and this is one of my favorites because you can get out and monitor nests that you see being built. Another book I love is Eastern Bird's Nest. Every bird builds a different nest, and I just find that fascinating, and they do it at different times of the year throughout the season for different reasons. Goldfinches build them late and bluebirds build them early. And so if it's something you're interested in, there's no end to the things you can learn about it. Project Budburst is a perfect one for this time of year. Their website also has some amazing tools for families, so I would encourage you to check it out. There's a whole link to phenology that families can do together, and they have something called the Blossom Blitz, which we're about to have happen eventually. I think it was going to warm up, and I do love that about Michigan, when all the trees just start to burst. So that's going to happen soon. And then the last one that I added for there, there's a whole, again, this is another book I'll share with you. This is a fairly new book called Citizen Science. There are hundreds of options if this is something that piques your interest. One of our family's favorite is The Journey North. In particular, we love to raise monarchs and release them when we find them on our native plants growing in our garden. This website I love. They have been sending me emails for weeks, and I've been able to watch the monarchs as they leave Mexico and begin to travel north. And then in the fall, you watch them leave and head south, and you can become part of that collecting data. But they also do they have grown from more than just monarchs, and they have hummingbirds. You can plant tulips, and they're trying to collect data on climate change by observing when different buds and tulip bulbs bloom across the globe. So cool stuff, citizen science. And again, there's no end to the possibilities. So technology is a great tool. I love it. I'm obviously not a pro at it, but it can be utilized really well for learning about the environment and the outdoors. But I also encourage you, when you're outside, to turn it off. So I use this example that Emerson says that we should adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. And it is that slowing down, turning off our phones, spending time looking at the clouds. That's when that sense of wonder and awe can really creep in. The feeling of awe and sense of wonder arises from the recognition of the deep mystery that surrounds us everywhere. And this feeling deepens as our knowledge grows. And so that is what continues to inspire me to teach in the work that I do. The wild world around me never ceases to amaze me, fill me with awe, fill me with wonder, humble me every time I'm outdoors. So I encourage you, just get outside and make observations, and that's where the learning will naturally evolve for you and your family and your kids. This is the part too that I think is vital when we're considering how are we going to grow stewards of our earth. When I think it's really important that we don't have our children, they're not forced to confront the perils of plastic pollution and climate change. What I want to encourage them to do is develop that relationship with nature first. Again, David Sobel has a great quote that I use often in my presentations, but he says, if we want our children to flourish, to become truly empowered, let us allow them to love the earth before we ask them to save it. And this resonates so much with my heart, because I think in the research that I've done, it is that personal narrative that so many of the environmentalists and educators that are doing great work and making a difference, they had that story from their childhood of someone taking them fishing or learning to identify trees as part of a class project. There's a hook that went into their heart, that connected them to the natural world. And that's our job right now, is to connect our children to the environment, to the places where they are living and growing and learning. And this gift of time, I guess, if you can try and look at it like that, when I keep trying to find silver linings in this experience, and we do have this gift of time to spend more time in the places where we are living and look closely at the natural world around us and learn from it. And hopefully we can grow little stewards of our earth from this experience. So the final thing I wanted to end with today is just, there are so many books. You can ask my husband, I have a book problem. But there are so many books I would love to recommend to you. So I added them to the slide. A lot of them I shared today. My favorite tree book is The Trees of Michigan and the Upper Great Lakes, if this is the region where you are living. And then this one is one that started my journey to creating sort of a seasonal rhythm for our family in our home. It's called The Rhythm of Family by Amanda and Blake Soul. She had a great blog for years while her kids were growing up too, but it's discovering a sense of wonder through the seasons. So this has a lot of great activities seasonally that you can use to connect your family to sort of a seasonal rhythm in your home. So, and then one more thing I wanted to show you, our tool for when we make observations in our yard and out, is I've just created, this is just a phenology journal. Every week there's a page. And so I go through, this one goes from 2014 until now. So I can look back and say, this week, for the last, however many years that you keep your journal, what are the observations we were making? That year we already had, in 2017, we already had 4 bluebird eggs in our nest box. This year we've noticed that this week they're just coming to check out the box. So just paying attention to those changes over time, if you stay in one place for many years, is a really connecting way to help you feel part of your environment. So I think that's all I have. I would love to hear questions and ideas from all of you. Oh, Megan, I can't hear you.
Again, not a tech webinar. Sally, so when is it too young? Like, when can you start them on nature learning? Like, my daughter's 21 months and she's in awe of birds and squirrels. Is it too young? And when do you start them? Like, is there
get her outside, sit them outside. A lot of it is just getting them used to being outside in all the weather. Again, we were joking earlier, there's no such thing as bad weather. And sometimes I've noticed that when my boys were really young, our hikes maybe weren't what could be considered as hikes, but we would just make an effort to make a routine of getting outside. And we're lucky we do have a Kent County Park in our front yard, and sometimes we just make it to the trailhead and turn back around. But we made the attempt, and they knew that it was part of our daily routine, was the importance of spending time outside.
I didn't even see if there are any questions. And I saw my friend Emily Moless is on here, and she loved the adventure pack. She said she's going to do that for her kindergarten class. I love that too, because it's like a sense of adventure. You get that wonderment with the compass and the journals. I love that.
We do add too, this is just one of those bags in a bag. And so when you're out, if you see trash, you can pick it up. Sometimes, obviously if it's not safe to have a whole classroom full of kids picking up trash, or you can have gloves in there. So you can have gloves when you're picking up trash. Use your judgment.
I was telling Sally yesterday, I was like, I'm so concerned. I want my daughter to be an incredible environmentalist. And it's all riled up. And Sally's like, and I love that point that you say you have to make them love it before you can ask them to protect it. And that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And it's so true. I think I joke around that I grew up in East Grand Rapids in the 90s, and I thought I was an environmentalist because I didn't litter. And it wasn't until I went out to college in Montana and I saw this entire ecosystem, these mountains and hiking in the woods. I remember the first time going hiking in Montana, and I'm like, wait, we're leaving the car? Like, What do you mean we're leaving the car? How far are we going? And I just remember that it was my hook. Montana was my hook, and I want to give that hook to my daughter. And so I love people like you that inspire us parents to get out there and teach our children. So thank you.
Well, and thank you to others, a bunch of great educators I see on here today. So thank you to our educators. And definitely that was what, with Grow Wise Learning, one of the intents was to help families connect with nature, because I can take your kids outside all day long, but if I can teach you to take your kids, then they're going to continue to go. There's my sweet mom. I saw Dad there too. I have good supporters, and my personal narrative, my dad was always out gardening and got me out there in the dirt. And I joke I did a TED talk, and I joke that I didn't appreciate it when I had to go get a tour of the tulips before I could get the keys to the car in high school. But now it's March, I started getting my seed started for my garden this summer already. So he planted that seed in my heart for sure.
Gardens are a big way to get them started, isn't it? To like grow like a pizza garden and like grow tomatoes and basil, like to make it fun like that.
I would always encourage gardens. Encourage them. I think that's a whole different webinar too. And right now, it's fascinating with the whole like victory garden kind of movement that started. I think, where did I read Johnny's? I think it was in the New York Times. Johnny said they had 300% increase in customers since this shelter in place started, because everyone realized, okay, we might as well stay at home and grow our garden. And I'm a little frustrated because I'm still going to get my seeds because of that. But what's cool is there are so many people that are going to be trying that this year. And if it's something you're interested in and you haven't done it, especially with littles, I would encourage radishes and peas are an easy start. And then cherry tomatoes are sort of the first three things that I would encourage people to start with.
Okay.
And radishes and peas you can start now. And then tomatoes, as soon as it warms up a little, get those out.
Great. Does anybody else have?
I have a question. Hey Sally, so when this stay-at-home order is done and we start traveling again, are there any tips for like how to do the nature-based learning differently when you're in a location that you're not so familiar with that might have different natural offerings?
Are you talking about far away traveling or trails in Michigan?
Yeah, call it like if you're going to a city you maybe haven't been to before, maybe it's somewhere that has more of a mountainous climate or more of a beachy climate or something that just different. Would there be any tips for how to figure out how to structure the nature-based learning that you want to do?
To follow what makes you excited. Like I know I have a brother out in Portland, Oregon, and waterfalls are his thing, like he loves to take everyone on waterfall tours when we come to visit him. Find something that you're curious about. I know personally when I'm out west, I like to find hot springs. What is it that you are interested in? And especially, I think that's how your kids become interested, because they see that it's something that you are drawn to do. Even just a day at the ocean is endlessly fascinating. And I think what I would encourage is, I always say do less well. And I don't mean don't do a good job. I mean, do fewer things to the best of your ability. And so find one place maybe and learn it well, or spend more time in it so you can watch a sunrise and a sunset instead of sort of zipping all over and doing lots of things. That's how I would encourage you to get to know a place in a new place.
Yeah, and hot springs, Matt. I don't know if you've ever been to one, Matt. That was a hook for me too. The first time I got into a hot spring, I'm like, is this serious? And then there was a crazy old Vietnam vet who lives in the woods, and he hopped out of the river totally naked, and he said, "Welcome to the springs." And I was like, oh my God, I haven't lived. This is amazing. But hot springs are incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, that would be something. Matt, you need to do a West Coast trip. I was telling Sally that when I went out to college in Montana, I'd never been west of the Mississippi, and my dad drove me through the country, and I watched the way that the landscape changed, and it's so cool to take your kids on road trips. I don't think people do that anymore.
Well, we used to take ours on a road trip every year from Michigan to Texas.
Oh, wow.
And, they grew to not even look at it anymore. It became too much. But my joy this year was watching my grandsons jump in the ocean down in Galveston. And that it was just, it's not the cleanest looking. It's dirty because of the ship channel looking. It's not beautiful blue waters like Bermuda or something. They loved it. They just loved the sand. They loved the waves. They looked for shells. They found jellyfish. I mean, you look at it all new fresh.
Yeah. It's that sense of wonderment we lose as adults, right? I had a baby, I'm like 80 years old. And I had a baby 2 years ago. And children bring back this sense of wonderment that you lost, that as a crass adult, you just, you forget the little wonders, like she sees a bird and she loses her mind. And I'm like, I don't stop enough to look at the birds and the flowers and the buds. And so
yeah,
I'm really hoping Sally opens a school.
More not it. I noticed, I know, no pressure. I have a couple friends that should be doing this with me. Some of them are on this call. So Eileen asked, is there a certain time of week that we do the phenology? I keep this on sort of a little shelf by the door. So mostly it's just like when we see things, we write it down. I noticed this 2 days ago. The first dandelion in the yard. I mean, that doesn't seem like something monumental, but I've made a point to write it down because that means that the pollinators are starting to get good, resources. So it's important. And my whole family is not as totally into it as I am. I'm sure you can't imagine. So I don't require them to do it once a week or anything, but what I've noticed by keeping it by the door, they will take their own effort to write when they see something now as they've gotten older.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think using our resources in our backyards are going to be really big for us with children out of school. Mm-hmm. Teaching creative ways to teach them, and keep them interested.
Yes.
Someone said they just noticed their first dandelion on Monday. Well, hopefully spring will come. Well, Sally, this has been a joy. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for doing this for us. I hope to bring you back again. I just think you're a wealth of knowledge, but it's your passion. I love nature people. They have so much passion. And it's good for us to get a dose of that in this crazy time. So thanks everybody for joining us. And we will have this taped live, and we will put this on our Facebook and our website so you can share this with friends. And I'll also send Sally the link too. So thanks everybody. Have a great weekend. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
It was fun. Thanks, Sally.
Take care.
Bye-bye.